All right, and we are live. So thank you guys for joining me for our first music listening club of 2026. And especially for listening to Brilliant Corners by Thelonious Monk with me. Before we get started here, I am going to do my normal everyday housekeeping. I'm going to try and do it as quickly as possible, trying to make this a more condensed thing. But this is our music club, but we actually have two other media clubs here at Dragonfly. We have another monthly club, our movie club, which this month we watched Citizen Kane, and we talked about that a couple of days ago. And if you didn't catch that one, while it's live, you can watch it on the replay and comment on it and voice your opinions for it and whatnot. We also have our quarterly book club that's happening this month, where we read The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And we're having that discussion on Friday at 7 p.m. After that, I will announce our next picks on our Facebook group. On the first of the month, we'll have a new movie pick, a new listening club pick, and a new book club pick. But the book club we won't be discussing until the end of April. So you'll have a little bit of time. It's a great pick. It's a book that I absolutely love, and it's a lot of fun. And I've been looking forward to discussing this with everybody for a while now. And if you like us and you like what we do, you can support us over on Patreon for as little as $2 a month. We have a lot of really, really exciting things coming up in 2026. So join us over there and find out more about it. And on that note, let's talk about some Thelonious Monk. I know the answer to this, but I ask it every time. So I need to ask it this time as well. Had you guys listened to this album before?
Never.
And did you like it?
Never heard of it before. How about you, Miguel?
I was familiar with all the material. I don't think I listened to this album because I kind of picked Monk stuff based on the drummer, and I just never thought that Max Roach was a really good fit, so I just skipped it because you could do Art Blakey, you could do Glenn Riley, right? But I was really impressed with how well Max worked in a Thelonious Monk context.
Yeah, I think it's
All the
important.
material I knew.
I think it's an important thing to note with Thelonious Monk of this is his first album that he released in a while that had his original compositions on it, but it's not the first time that a lot of these original compositions were played on an album. He has a habit of redoing songs multiple times over with different groups of people because his lead sheets are so short. So the actual song portion itself is very, very small, and then most of the tracks are improvisation. So it really changes depending on who's playing and the day they're playing and how they feel. So a lot of these songs were on previous albums of his, and they appeared on future albums. Do you have a favorite track?
Oh God. I mean, I like all these tunes. I like the tunes that he's playing. I don't even know how to pronounce it. The Celeste at the
Oh,
Symphony
yeah,
of Japan.
Celesta.
Celesta. And I think this version of Brilliant Corners, I think Max Roach did an absolutely wonderful solo in it. And right now, because I just listened to it for this album for the first time a couple of days ago, that's my favorite tune because I was just blown away with what a great solo he did, especially considering how much turmoil was going on in the session. And from what little I know about Max Roach as a personality, I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have been happy with the people who were, either not playing or complaining. So we won't go into the Max stories about Freddie Hubbard, but I would do Brilliant Corners just because I thought the drum solo was just freaking amazing. Tim, how about you?
Oh, well.
I love all these tunes. It's impossible to pick.
I like them all, but I love Brilliant Corners. And I love this version of I Surrender Dear because I love hearing Monk play solo. There's this thing that Sting said in his interview with Rick Beato, where he talks about what he looks for in a tune. And he says, I want to be surprised. And the thing about, no matter how long I've listened to Brilliant Corners, it still surprises me. And if I get away from it a while, I forget everything that's going on and I get the same surprise again. And you never really, even if you know it, when you hear things shift in that tune, it still comes as a surprise, partly because of the form, the weird form.
Yeah,
And
it's got a 7-bar section in there, doesn't it?
it's got a couple of weird
Yeah, it's
sections. But
weird.
yeah,
It's
I
so
mean,
cool.
I love Brilliant Corners. I love all the ideas in it, and how it changes, and how I think one of the things that I love about it is that the almost marchy kind of sections feel like they're it's like a tension is building up that only gets relieved when Max goes into a nice double time, rhythm on the ride. So I love that, and I love I Surrender Dear. Um, those are the two standouts for me for those different reasons.
And
So
he
I think
plays
it's
the
I think it's
celeste
safe to
on
say you
Ice
both
Under Your
like it.
Deer, right?
No,
Sorry, he doesn't. I mean, along with the piano, no.
I
I'm getting
don't
the tracks
think
mixed up.
so. I think it's just Panonica.
Oh, I thought he did on 2 different tracks. Okay.
No, I think it's
No,
just Panonica.
Max plays timpani on Bemsha.
But I Surrender Dear is just piano.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I
If
thought.
you've never if you've never listened to Solo Monk, the album Solo Monk, it's on Columbia. I forget what year it is. That's
Mm.
just such a wonderful, wonderful album. If you're into the weirdness that is Thelonious Monk, because to be very clear, he's a very idiosyncratic player, and I don't think the average listener really gets him. So
Yeah,
Uh,
because it doesn't sound right.
I'm actually a little upset that Beckett's not with us tonight because she is
me
not a
too.
jazz person. You are both jazz people. Um,
I was so looking forward to hearing what she thought of
and
this.
so I thought it would be really interesting to have somebody that is so far removed from jazz because I'm not a jazz person, but I've studied jazz before, and I will be completely honest. Thelonious Monk's solo stuff is the only stuff of his that I really like. This album in particular for me stresses me out.
Why?
Mm.
Brilliant Corners gives me so much anxiety.
Yeah.
And then I never quite recover from it. And I feel like I am constantly feel like I'm in a safe spot. And then he does something dissonant and I'm just thrown off kilter. Like I never quite recover from the anxiety that Brilliant Corners gives me. And I knew I wanted to do Thelonious Monk. And I initially thought about doing a solo album. And then I was like, no, we need to talk about Brilliant Corners.
I was surprised that this is the album that you picked because it is such a difficult album for lack of a better word, the casual jazz listener. For those of us who love Monk and for those of us who love jazz, it's an easy album, but if you're more on the other side of that fandom, I think it's a very difficult album to enjoy.
Yeah, and I mean, I did actually pick this album with the intention of having both you and Miguel on the call. I wasn't expecting somebody new to come into this discussion. I was
Right.
kind of expecting this to be a core group thing, so I felt like this was the easiest way in. But I feel like I also need to explain myself a little bit of why Brilliant Corners stresses me out so much. It is notoriously difficult. It caused so many problems amongst the people he was playing with. Um, yeah, it caused so
Well,
many
at this
problems with
session,
them.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, specifically because of the song Brilliant Corners. It is ABA form, but weird. It's like like the first A section is 8 bars and then the second one is 7 and then they also play it in like double time after they play it through the first time.
It's so crazy.
And there's
That's
so
part of
many
the
like
Isn't that
triplet
part of the
quarter
head sheet,
notes.
that the double time thing? They're not just riffing on the double time. That's like
No,
written.
it's written in the sheets.
That's so
Yeah.
awesome.
And for me, just always like triplet quarter notes always throws me off a little
Mhm.
bit, that's very prominent in like the melody of it. And so it just always feels like you have to really know who you're playing with because they can just pull the rug out from under you and like play a cruel joke on you at any point in time.
You know,
Yeah.
that's a great point to make here and to discuss. I think there's a discussion to be had, and I think Miguel has an opinion on it. I'm wondering if you do. Um, I found it interesting that Miguel was surprised that about Roach being on this and that you avoided it because it was Roach. Because honestly, there are you. I remember there was a session that Monk did with Miles at Prestige. I think it was the sessions that were on Modern Jazz Giants. And Miles was so frustrated with having Monk play behind him because of the way that he plays, that he asked Monk to sit out. And he loved Monk. They were like brothers, but he Miles hated the way Monk did not support him in the rhythm section when he was playing a solo. And so you have to find Monk. I think Max is perfect. And you made the comment about how Max doesn't put up with the bullshit. And I think you have to be willing to give yourself to what Monk is doing in order to play with him. Otherwise, you're going to be fucking miserable. Which is why what's his name, the bass player, Oscar
Pettiford.
Pettiford.
Pettiford. Thank you. And Ernie, what's his name, the trumpet player, sax player, excuse me. Why they were so frustrated. Clark Terry wasn't really known for playing this kind of stuff, and yet he sits quite comfortably in Brilliant Corners. He understands the assignment in a way that, Pettiford and the other saxophone player didn't get it. And Max understands the assignment, always does.
Well, and I think, and he's the way, because Max to me is sort of like kind of the school marm and the professor, and he follows the form of the song to the T. And I think he's doing a great job of it on Brilliant Corners, in that solo, because it's like, oh my God, it's like Thelonious himself on drums, you know? And but I just thought, I mean, to me, the Monk groove is kind of gut bucket and, sort of, greasy. And that's like more Art Blakey, more Ben Riley, And I just thought, oh, Max is going to play it too pretty or too straight, But he did do a great job. And, the thing about Brilliant Corners is like, it's just so, um, how do you say, um, new or
Idiosyncratic.
idiosyncratic and weird. I mean, this is like 1950s. I don't know when he wrote it. That by now, when you watch, and in fact, I had just watched a modern ensemble, Steve Smith's band, an acoustic band, play Brilliant Corners, and it's just like another standard, right? Nobody's sweating, right? Because like you grew up with it. Obviously, the people playing on this session didn't grow up with it, but there is and I'm going to go back and forth between like Frank Zappa and Monk here. I don't think he's doing anything that's metrically or mathematically weird. He's being very, very human, but in a weird way. So when I hear Brilliant Corners now, knowing what I know about Frank Zappa, I'm going, oh my God, like Zappa had to be hugely influenced by Monk in a certain manner of speaking, and especially rhythmically. And then when you think of Baloo, Bolivar, Baloo's R, that's just a Monk pronouncing that phrase in a really weird way. And that's what Zappa did. A lot of Zappa's rhythms were really, really weird, but they were just following the rhythms of human speech. And then you have to put the caveat that Frank's family was from Eastern Europe, right? So it's sort of the rhythms of those speeches, right? Or those languages. And so when you understand Frank Zappa that way, it becomes much more earthy. And he had guys in his band who couldn't read music and would play all those crazy rhythms, right? All of his lead singers, none of them, like Adrian Belew didn't read music, Frank Ike White, none of those guys read music. And I think Monk is that way too, where it's really, really difficult if you analyze it, but if you feel it and surrender yourself to it, it's much more accessible, right? And um, and I don't think Max Roach is a better musician than Oscar Pettiford or the other gentleman, but I guarantee you, like Tim said, he surrendered to it and he embraced it, right? And he wasn't the problem in the session, clearly, because that's a absolutely brilliant one of my favorite Max Roach drum solos is Brilliant Corners.
I also feel like he had such a good base for it that he could like build off of it in a way that I think that everybody else had problems with when improvising over Brilliant Corners. I think Max Roach usually like sits so far back and like plays to the beat
Hmm.
almost religiously that like in this it almost feels correct. Like I don't know, the drum solo in Brilliant Corners feels like a relief.
Yeah, it does. Well, I mean, but it's also, but he's following the form
Hmm.
almost too much. Sometimes your criticisms of Max can be just like, dude, relax. You go because he like religiously, there's a form, and by God, he's sticking to it. And it is a release, but it's a release, I think, only because I now know the context of what the session was like, and it was pasted together from 4 different takes.
Yes.
That he's the one who got it. Right. And everybody else is just like fingernails on the chalkboard trying to get through the chart. And Max is, no, I got this. You guys are just, whatever.
He not only follows the form, Max, he quotes the melody,
Yeah.
which is something that you hear all the time with Max, and particularly in longer pieces. But that harkens to also to his drum ensemble and boom, which that's 10 percussionists, some of them playing tonal percussion instruments, doing melodies. One of the guys, I can't remember which one it was, plays a musical saw, and he plays,
Yeah.
I think he plays body and soul on a musical saw, if you can imagine that. And it's just ingenious. But Max is one of those drummers that understands, hey, I'm a drummer, but I need to know the melody, you know?
And the
And
form.
obviously he
Absolutely.
does because he quotes the fucking thing.
Yeah.
There is a thing that I want to mention that Miguel mentioned, but I want to, in case anyone's listening out there, Brilliant Corners was so difficult for them to record that they recorded it like 25 different times, but never made it through the entire piece, and then had to bring that together by splicing all the different takes together. So they couldn't even play it all the way through. They did, well, by they, I mean just Thelonious Monk actually made a simplified version of it for later recordings with people
Oh,
so it could be played all the way through in the late 60s. So,
yeah.
like a decade later, he was like, apparently, this is too hard. Let's make it a little easier. Um, but another thing that I think is interesting about Thelonious Monk's music is he writes so much in like his rhythms are so specifically his and so repetitive that I feel like you could almost link a lot of his songs together without missing a beat.
Yeah.
And I know it's part of it is like the blues, but I think rhythmically, um, he's got some signature quirks that I think
Yeah.
lend themselves so that you could play all of his songs together as like one long track of just going from one head to the next head to the next head without, and you wouldn't even notice.
Yeah. Well, and it is blues, but blues taken to another place, right? And that's what I was talking about when it's gut bucket and greasy. And so when I think of like really blues-based jazz drummers, it's like I'm not thinking Axe Roach. I'm thinking like Blakey and folks like that. And the same thing that oh my God. Um Jesus, I'm completely forgetting. Who was the out guy? Charlie Hayden played bass with him, Billy Higgins.
Ornette Coleman.
Ornette Coleman's the same. That's blues, right? And it's totally different in a way that Thelonious Monk is totally different, but it's got that gut bucket kind of bass under like this really radical thing on top, you know? So But the big thing I want to know is a photography question. So, Rebecca, in 1950s technology, how did they do that album cover?
I
That 5 shots of
assumed
them.
it was a composite, but honestly, I had that thought and I did not look into it as much as I really should have.
Well, like it has to be 5 different shots, but he's got the same expression, and I can't imagine Monk sitting there for 5 different shots, frozen. Like,
He's actually frowning heavily in the two in the back.
It looks like they used mirrors to do it.
It
oh,
does, but it also doesn't. Like I was trying to figure that out as well.
but you can't fake that up in the dark room, right? That's like that, you know.
You could probably do a multiple exposure. I wouldn't know exactly
Um,
how to do it, but the angle is shooting from the front. You would see some level of it unless they were like hiding behind a white sheet
wow.
with like a hole and then shooting down. They are shooting it a little bit down, so they could do it that way.
Yeah. Hey, I also at
But I
one
wanted to
point
look into it. So thank you for reminding me of this thing that I wanted to look into.
I wanted to talk about how so, you think of you were talking about, like, how I'm a jazzer, and I kind of my brain doesn't work that way, but although I appreciate a lot of jazz, I'm not a jazz performer, but I got introduced to him, I mean, other than the stuff that's just everywhere, like Round Midnight, through, Hal Wilner tribute, and, Tim, you familiar with Hal Wilner's, tribute
Va-
albums? What's that?
Vaguely, not. Let's say for the purpose of this conversation, no, I'm not.
So Hal Wilner, he was like, I don't even know how to describe him. He was a music producer and he had the gig, some kind of technical music gig at Saturday Night Live for years. And he would be producing an album in Japan and fly back for the weekend in New York and do his gig and fly back to Japan. He did this like all the time. And he would do these compilations. He had this thing called Amacord Nina Rota, which was, a tribute to all the music from the Fellini films. And there was my favorite Disney album of all time is him doing all the Disney music, but it's like Tom Waits doing Hi Ho from the Seven Dwarfs. Anyway, so we did a Thelonious Monk album called That's How I Feel Now. And it's all these different artists on it. And there's a lot of jazzers, there's a lot of out jazzers, a lot of trad jazzers, but there's also people like Todd Rundgren on there and NRBQ. And that to me, it was like the White Album of Thelonious Monk music because there was a lot of failed experiments, right? Like Todd Rundgren had a mid 1980s really cheesy drum machine going all the way through the Monk tune that he did. And it's just like, yeah, you can listen to it once and then you're kind of done with it. But I think that really, in the same way that the White Album really resonated with me. It resonated with me because he's just like there's just so many ways you could do um, Monk's compositions that weren't straight jazz, quote unquote, right? And that was part of the reason. I mean, I don't know if I said it already, but Monk is absolutely my favorite jazz composer, man. And one of my daughter's given me a lot of great gifts, but when she had no money and she was in undergrad, she gave me a Monk greatest hits album, right? And she and I had never once talked about it. So he's one of my favorites, but I think he's one of my favorites because of how I got introduced to him in sort of like a sort of multi-genre, multicultural thing, as opposed to just listening to one of the Monk albums.
I feel like that's a safer way of getting into Monk.
Yeah, because all the crazy tunes are on there, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure Panonic, I think 4 of the tunes on this album are on there. Certainly the scary tune, Brilliant Corners, is on there. And and I think it's a rock band, Chris Spedding with Anton Fig on drums doing Brilliant Corners. Anyway,
I'll have
so
to look it up because I
yeah,
am curious how this translates. I
yeah. And it's the 80s, but his stuff is brilliant. And that's not even my favorite of his albums. Like my favorite of his albums is the Disney album, just because, I like grew up as a kid. I'm not that much of a fan of Disney now, but as a kid, I was sort of like politically, against Disney. And, you would have Michael Stipe singing Disney and Tom Waits doing the Hi Ho song as a completely dark dirge, and just all these amazing people, Los Lobos doing stuff. It was really, really cool. Sinead O'Connor. Anyway, I
I
digress.
I understand the impulse to hate Disney, but Man, those songs are all fucking classics, you know, and those songwriters weren't Disney songwriters. They just happened to be hired to write songs for Disney, and they wrote, Someday My Prince Will Come. I mean, that's a cornerstone
That's
of
the Sinead
of
Connor too.
jazz improvisation.
Yeah, and in
So
the liner notes, not to go down the Disney trail, I'll say this and stop. In the liner notes to that album, the Hal Wilner Disney compilation, there was a famous film critic saying that the Disney films are the music, and you can make an argument that Disney films up to a certain era are just like, music videos for the great songs.
yes, you can.
Anyway,
My favorite, and here we go.
Well, we're
Let me
going
take
down a rabbit hole here.
let me just take 30 seconds. Growing up, my favorite Disney movie was The Jungle Book. And I picked when it went on Blu-ray about 10 years ago, I picked up a copy and watched the movie. And the musical numbers were fabulous, but the movie as a whole was just a waste of my time. I couldn't believe how much I loved it as a kid. And I'm like, I'm sure kids enjoy it, but I just jump fast forward to the musical numbers that I love.
yeah.
Because the
You
movie
gotta
just
you gotta hear this album too, Tim. Los Lobos does I want to be like you, the ape song.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to Thelonious Monk.
Yeah,
And
I was going to say, I was like, we got really off topic there for
sorry,
a second, and I was just trying to figure out
hijack.
how mirrors work. Um, but you did bring up that like Monk's work has been like brought over by other genres and like been used to influence people in other genres. And that's hard for me to picture while listening to it, and yet I know it's true. um, I think that the
Yeah,
to
especially after being traumatized by Brilliant Corners, you're going, really?
uh,
Yeah,
honestly, I think everybody who does that kind of thing shaves the edge off of Monk's stuff in order to make it palatable for a wider audience.
he
I mean,
loves dissonance.
he does, which is why I love him. That I mean, either I love him because of Dissonance, or I got into Dissonance because of him. I'm not sure why it is, but I'd rather play a minor second than play a major third any day of the week, because that's just how my ears work. And I think a lot of that is Monk.
I think that's fair. I think that's why I can't relax after Brilliant Corners is because he tends to punctuate the end of every statement with a dissonant chord, like with some kind of minor second. Um,
and
but
it's
it's
not
very
slow. He's
easy.
like pounding. He is
Oh
like
yeah,
hammering the keyboard. It's
and I
not. No, do you think he meant that? Oh no, he meant that. He
he
totally meant
meant
that.
that.
He'll play a major seventh chord in first inversion, so he gets that major seventh right next to the root, so that he gets that,
It
that
makes me feel like Thelonious Monk cursed a lot in his regular speaking. There's just something about it that kind of feels like that, like it's like an expletive. Um, and I
Yeah.
like the occasional dissonant tone as like a punctuation in my music. It's just very obvious in his, and it's written into the lead sheets. It's not an added thing, it's something that he writes into it. I actually was able to find like a bunch of it written out, like just the heads. And yeah, I was surprised by how many of them are written into it.
Yeah.
I honestly think that's his sense of humor. Because whenever he does that, I smile because I think he's just it's like poking fun at people by doing that.
Oh, and that's another thing. So I have this great DVD, no glare, live in '66 with Charlie Rouse, Ben Riley on drums, and Larry Gales on bass. And
That was his
when
perfect band. That was his
yeah,
perfect band.
Ben Riley, I got a Ben Riley story for later. But the when he would like when he's like feeling it, and it's never when he's playing ahead, it's when he's backing up a soloist. He just gets up and he's dancing. And he's dancing like he's in a club in New Orleans. It's just really cool and funky. And like if I could ever make Thelonious Monk dance in one of his tunes like that, it would be like, that's it, we're done. That's what's going on my headstone. I'm out, right? So cool. And there is this sort of energy about him. I don't think he did anything like other people. right? I don't think he talked like other people. He didn't dance like other people. He certainly didn't play jazz like other people, you know? He was like a really idiosyncratic person that if he was in, you know, I understand he had some mental health issues, but if he was in a good state, I can't imagine it not being just a complete blast to hang out with him.
He also lets everybody else like take a spot on the stage. Like he has time to stand up and dance because he's giving them the space to do that. Um,
Yeah,
and I
this
think that's something that's very interested about his stuff specifically is even though a lot of jazz from this time frame was improv based, I find that his feels like everybody's allowed out to make their speech and given the proper time to make their speech, and it doesn't feel like anybody gets cut off at any point in time, and it also doesn't feel like anyone was like stilted in that way.
yeah.
um
When he dances, he's like celebrating something that's happening on stage. It
mhm.
seems like, oh my God, that was amazing. And he doesn't express it on the piano. He just gets up and he's like doing the monk dance, and then he sits down again. I mean, it's not like he doesn't do it for like a minute, right? It's just, you know, a few bars.
Right, yeah.
Still the most awesome thing I could ever imagine happening to me on stage.
You know, I was thinking a lot this week about Max being the only holdover between the sessions. And it's funny that you brought up Blakey because, you know, the first thing that I was thinking of, well, if Max walked, who else would he have gotten? And Blakey is based on his recorded live. Blakey's relatively conservative in terms of how far away he wants the band to step from the composition. Whereas I think Monk doesn't care. Monk has this very idiosyncratic sense of time that isn't necessarily related to the time a drummer is playing or anything else that's going on. He marches to his own drummer, and I think he allows, there's an openness and freedom in all the recordings that I've ever heard. And I don't think that I think Blakey would have walked out with Oscar Pettiford and the other saxophone player because I just don't. And Max Roach loves a challenge, and I don't think Blakey's like that. And I think some of that is that's also has to do with being the alpha in the band. And Blakey's always been the alpha in his bands, and Monk is like this very passive alpha. And I just can't see Blakey working in that context. I
Yeah,
can't
he
see.
sounds great. He did a couple albums with him that I have, and it's just to me, it's like the perfect thing. But it's more like the groove itself as opposed to what he's actually playing, and whether
Yeah.
that's interesting or not. It's just like the groove. It's like that gut bucket, you know, blues based thing.
Do you
I think
think
I was going to say,
oh,
I think Philly Joe Jones would have fit in with this band. I think Tony Williams would have had an absolute blast, although he wasn't old enough at this point. So I'm sorry, Becca, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, do you think that he was a different person to work with outside of this album on different albums? Like, do you think it was just
I think he was very consistently Monk on all his sessions.
and just hoping that it meshes well with the other musicians?
I don't know that,
I don't know
honestly,
if he was. It's just like this is what I do,
Yeah.
I'm not
right?
sure he cared. I'm not sure he cared.
I would think he cared probably less than any human jazz performer I've ever heard of, probably even less than Miles cared about whether you liked what he did or not. You know, I think he
Well,
was just that was what he was.
I think the dancing says it all. I think for Monk, getting together to play is fun. It was fun for him. He just enjoyed it.
Absolutely.
You give him a group of competent musicians who can handle the demands of working with him, then he's happy as a clam. That's why that band with Charlie Rouse and Ben Riley, works so well. They were just everybody knew what needed to be done. I've been thinking a lot this week listening to this again, about how Monk plays. We talk a lot about his harmonic choices, but he also goes rubato in places that you don't necessarily think an improviser or even a rhythm player is going to. He'll the drummer's doing one thing and he'll be like, oh yeah, I think I'm going to put this here behind the beat. He's never ahead of the beat. He's never
Mhm.
ahead of the beat. He always plays behind the beat when he does his little time things. There's a recording of him. I forget what tune. It's a Miles Davis date, and they're swinging. They're doing about 130 beats per minute, and there's an eighth note ride going, and Monk decides to play the melody halftime, and it's so weird and wonderful. I'll look it up and I'll send you guys a link to it. It's so much fun when the band is grooving along and Monk just goes ding ding ding. I just love the guy. I think a lot of it is a sense of humor, but I think he always knows where one is. He'll fuck around with the time, but he knows exactly where he's at all times.
Yeah. And that reminds me of another thing about him. We talked about him being based in the blues, but being this really idiosyncratic expression of it. I think there's no West African tradition on the piano, but he, to me, is, in terms of rhythm, he's a very West African. I mean, and again, that's where all the slaves in the Americas came from. But he's like, that rhythmic sense is very West African, where you can just be kind of out, right? And then somebody's keeping it, and then you go back home when it's ready. And that comes from most West African music is drums, and if there's any vocalization, it's chanting. It's basically rap, but a lot of times the role for the music is you're accompanying dancers, right? And if you think about West African dancing, which is again really close to hip hop dancing, there's a lot of rubato phrases, and the solo drummer follows the dancer. But there's a rhythm section of like bass drums and middle drums and higher voice drums. They don't move, right? You guys can go out to Mars and back, but we stay, and there is a one to come back to, right? And if I was accompanying somebody like Monk, I would just like let them go as opposed to let them freak me out, and just make sure they know where the one is. Like, okay, we're back at the top, right? And that's my sense of him playing with the time. He's not trying to take everybody there, because if everybody goes there, it's A, probably going to be a train wreck, and B, that's not what he's trying to do, because there's no tension. If everybody goes, then it becomes like a new thing. There's only tension if only he's the one going. If I don't know if I explained that clearly, but anyway, I think there's a real West African rhythmic sense there.
I think a lot of it, I did briefly look into like Thelonious Monk's background and things along those lines. He never really had a strong classical education. It was constantly, they tried to do that, it didn't work. Um, he took lessons from his neighbor who mainly taught him like ragtime styles.
Yeah, stride stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, stride stuff. And then he like played hymns with the church. And outside of that, he went to a school for gifted students, but did not graduate from it. He went to go study classical piano and discontinued the lessons. He mainly learned stuff from the world around him and from playing gigs.
Yeah.
And so it's like almost this natural internal timekeeping that I feel like he has.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
Paired with the thing that we were talking about when we did our movie club pick, Citizen Kane, which is none of the guys that did that movie knew the rules to making a movie, and therefore they had nothing to follow. They were just intrinsically breaking the rules. And that almost feels like that's our theme for the month.
Mm.
Um,
Well, I think he knows the rules, but he's like, doesn't stop him from breaking them, you know?
I don't think he cares about the rules.
I think he has big enough ears that he doesn't have to care about the rules. Um,
Yeah.
it's going back to it's when I was listening to this album, I was really thinking about the melodies, particularly Monk's, and honestly, everything I hear from him is steeped in blues. And I thought about all the compositions from all the other albums that he's done, and that's something that always comes out. And it doesn't have, I mean, he wrote a lot of 12 bar blues, but the blues is always present in his melodies. You just can't escape it. It doesn't matter whether it's a ballad from a Broadway show from the 30s, or it's just the blues is always present and it's playing. And I think some of that has to do with why he plays with the time, because the traditional blues people didn't use that strict sense of time that we've grown accustomed to, particularly in jazz. So yeah, I hear the blues in practically every note that Monk plays.
Yeah, I would agree. But his type of blues, right?
Yeah, like I said earlier, I find that like a lot of his music and his compositions you can like string together as a longer composition, and I think that does have its basis in blues, but he always messes with it, kind of like talking about the bars being like 8 bars and then 7 bars for some reason. Like
Hmm.
it's always surprising, and for me that makes him very chaotic, but it sounds like to you guys that makes him just sound very playful. um
Well, no, I mean, even when he writes within form, you take something like Straight No Chaser, which is a straight 12 bar blues, but the
mhm.
way he does the melody, he offsets the second phrase. The way he pushes da 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 da. He shifts the start of the melody by the time he gets to the second phrase, the second 4 bars, and it's if you're not paying attention, you don't, because it's so smooth, you probably don't even notice it. I didn't notice it for years. And then when I learned how to play the tune, I'm like, oh, wait, what? And yeah, so even when he keeps the form straight, he'll use the melody to play with the time and shift your conception of where one is.
This is my general question that I have in my thing that I've been trying to figure out how to fit into this conversation and then just failing miserably at it. Um, so this album was released in 1957, which was a very popular time for music of the time. I think we did Bill Evans earlier from the same time frame. Um, but how do you think Monk's approach differs from like other jazz pianists of that same time frame, and even just that like the future? What makes him him? Is
Well, I
it
think
in
he's in,
the rhythms that he plays? Is it in the blues basis? Is it?
well, I think he's more playful. It's his rhythmic approach and also like the dissonances, you know. I think he writes really beautiful melodies, but it's easy to forget that when there's these crazy dissonances going on. And I also think he's of the people I think of as great pianists, I kind of think of him. I mean, I think he's my favorite um, jazz composer, and I've heard a lot of people saying, he's like the second greatest jazz composer behind Ellington, right? So I think, yeah, he's that sort of the crazy wild piano guy with the cool rhythm and the crazy dissonances and harmonies, but he's also like a really, really good composer, right? Even though some of the tunes, aren't hugely dissimilar to each other. So I think, um, and I think so. I read somewhere that Round Midnight's been covered more than any other tune in jazz history, including the Ellington stuff. So I don't know. Did I answer your question?
I think so.
Yeah, but he's one of those guys that you just it's like you drop the needle, you hear 2 seconds, and it's Monk. It's like and same thing with Miles Davis, same thing with Louis Armstrong, right? He's just one of those guys that's so uniquely himself, and therefore just elevating this to just artistry and not just music. I think that's the greatest artists are just like instantly recognizable. you know, and he's one of those, which means he transcends most jazz composers and certainly most jazz pianists just because of that alone. And just on a technical level, I forget who wrote this, but it was another piano player who said that he could do those Art Tatum crazy scalar runs. He had the technique to do that. He just never did it, right? So I think there's a lot of talent in there and a lot of knowledge in there that he's just not interested in pursuing because he's interested in being himself. I forgot who it was who says, but you know, somebody I would trust saying that, you know, as opposed to some critic. But you know, I did want to say I do have a real quick Led Zeppelin connection. So John Bonham from Led Zeppelin was a huge Max Roach fan and would literally quote Max Roach solos in Led Zeppelin shows when he's playing his drum solo, especially what is that thing? The drum also waltzes, something like that. And when I heard Max, shoot, I forget what track it was. The first track on the second side where he's playing timpani. He's got the tonic and the root.
Dempster's Swing is where he's playing timpani.
Dempster Swing, right? And then I'm going, oh my God, that's where Bonham got that from too, because Bonham always had two timpani behind him. I don't think he ever used them in a Led Zeppelin song, or very rarely. And it was just sort of like there as a color there for his solos. That's my theory, and I'm sticking to it.
I'm looking something up real quick because I can't remember. Oh, I know what it is. It's Mr. Freezy. What year was that? So 56. So I think it was, it's about the same time when Max had a band with Clifford Brown, and it was a quartet with Richie Powell, Bud Powell's brother, on piano, and Clifford Brown and Richie Powell were killed in a car accident, and it kind of destroyed Max for a while. And then he put together a new band with Sonny Rollins and Ray Bryant on piano, and they did this album called Max Roach Plus Four. It was quintet, and it's a great album. And they do a thing called Mr. Freezy, which after they play the head, Max Roach does an entire solo on timpani, and it's contemporary to this. It's 50. I think it's 56. So I don't know whether he played, because my understanding is they found some instruments on this album. They found some instruments lying around the studio, and that's how the Celesta gets in the into Panonica, and that's how the timpani gets into Bemsha Swing. But he does a whole timpani solo on Mr. Freezy from Max Roach Plus Four.
Wow. Anyway, I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
I'm filled with useless facts.
They're useful here.
Yeah. Getting back to your question on what makes Monk unique, I think that, and I hadn't thought about this till today when we're having this discussion about, a lot of songwriters writing in this genre, in this idiom, they try to write to the form, and I don't think Monk ever gave a shit about the form. He heard things a certain way, which was not the way most people heard things, and I think that's what makes him so unique, and that he wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo. His rhythm playing, I understand why Miles was frustrated having Monk play behind him. At the same time, I wouldn't want to not have Monk to play behind other people who could deal with it. I think he's so unique and so didn't care for whatever the prevailing standards were, and that's what allowed him to do the things that he did, both as a player and a composer. There's nobody else like him. There's nobody in the world that sounded like him as a player. Nobody in the world that wrote songs like that. He's a 1 in a million shot the right sperm got to the right egg, and out popped Thelonious Monk, and this is what you get.
Right time, right temperature, just
Yeah.
right
Everything.
things for.
His accompanist style, it's interesting because it sounds like sometimes, I don't know if I don't think he's doing this intentionally, but it's almost like he's duetting, right? Sometimes it's just so, and it's not like he's busy and it's not like he's overplaying, but it's like present, right? And I wonder if sometimes he's doing that to sort of inspire the soloist. And then when he does that and he inspires the soloist, then he goes and dances, right? But yeah, I could see. I definitely went to school with a lot of people that if Monk was accompanying them on a solo, they would be like, there would be sharp glances. They didn't know who it was. It'd be like, shut up. Trying to play a Coltrane solo here, you jerk face.
Yeah.
Anyway,
My final question of the night is kind of going back to the fact that Beckett's not here, unfortunately, with us tonight.
We miss you, Beckett.
Where should she start
Oh,
with Thelonious Monk? Like, if somebody doesn't know a lot about jazz but is interested in listening to more of Thelonious Monk, I would actually not recommend this album to them.
well, you know what?
But I am not as familiar with his entire
I
discography.
know
It's
that.
massive. But where would you suggest somebody start?
um, uh, the Ellington album, which the name I don't remember.
I think it
Uh,
just might be Monk Plays Ellington.
yeah, I think it's Monk Plays Ellington. I think Straight No Chaser. Um,
You
I
mean the
would,
album?
yes, the album Straight No
Yeah.
Chaser. Um, and just to get a sense of him as a soloist, I do the Columbia solo Monk, although himself is also a good one too. That I think is the closest I could get to something that will ease listeners into the Monk universe, if there is any.
I have a two-pronged approach. So this is that Monk's Greatest Hits CD that my daughter bought me when she had no money. And it's like Bamsha Swing is on here around midnight, Straight No Chaser, Blue Monk. I mean, it's just like this
A
guy
best
had
of.
hits. It's not like the
Yeah.
Bill Evans hits that only the jazz cognoscenti know.
Yeah,
So, and the other thing is that Hal Wilner album, that was my introduction. It's just like a bunch of artists from a bunch of different genres, plenty of jazz heavies, but not only jazz heavies. And there's rock musicians all over the place. And I think at least one classical person. And, and, and so if they sort of have a sense of jazz, the Monk Greatest Hits, if they need to get introduced to jazz, that Hal Wilner compilation, That's How I Feel. I think it's called That's How I Feel Now. It's one of Monk's phrases. That's how I feel today.
it
So,
sounds like the selection on that album is a fairly easy would make an easy go of getting into Monk.
and I think I don't think they did Straight No Chaser. But I think Donald Fagen did Round Midnight. So I think it's basically Monk's Greatest Hits with a bunch of different, you know, music genres pitching in.
I would always start with Round Midnight. That's the easiest one. That's easily the best way to slip somebody into Monk.
The gateway drug.
It's yes, it's the gateway drug. Because there's really nothing weird for a listener. It can be a challenging tune to play. Monk was very critical about people who didn't play it right, but I think for the average listener, they don't hear any of the complications that are in it. It's such a beautiful melody that it's a perfect place to start. And then a lot of the blues, Straight No Chaser, even for the weird rhythm thing that's going on, it's easy to hear. It's not difficult. Yeah, and I think I Surrender Dear off of this album is a beautiful, beautiful recording.
I agree.
And then
I
there's hear him, listen to him solo. I don't know which. It's probably on Solo Monk. His tribute to his wife Nellie, Crepuscule with Nellie, is
Yeah,
a
it's on
beautiful,
here.
beautiful tune. Yeah, just that's probably my favorite Monk tune. If he asked me to pick a favorite Monk tune,
Ooh. Oh, sorry.
I'm
All right.
sorry, Beth, I rolled over you.
No. It's just like you're picking your favorite tune, and I was like, my favorite. I can maybe give you my favorite 10. Yeah, favorite one.
You'll make your own compilation album.
I think it's weird for me to pick Crepuscule with Nellie because it is such a it's not something like Brilliant Corners, which I also love, but it always mellows me out and it makes me wistful. There's something about that melody that I think that's if you're going to if you're Monk and you're going to write a tribute to your wife, I think that's the perfect way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this greatest hits, Tim, it's got 2 solo pieces. He does Round Midnight solo and Ruby My Dear solo piano,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And I think I mean, to me, that's the pure Round Midnight for me is just him
Mhm.
playing it on a piano.
He
There
famously
you have
criticized
it.
he famously criticized the shit out of Miles Davis for a while, saying, "You're still playing it wrong." And I don't know specifically what he was saying Miles was playing wrong, but he was always in Miles' shit about him not playing Around Midnight correctly.
You know what? I was thinking that as a composer, he might be really fussing about the harmonies and melodies, but he might be fussing about the rhythm, knowing
Could
Monk.
be.
It's like, dude, you're playing that rhythm, that quarter note triplet thing is wrong, right?
Yeah.
Whatever.
All right. So we are coming up on an hour. Was there anything that anybody wanted to add before we end for the night?
That went really quick. Monk is the best. Please
I
go
want to
out
thank
and consume some Monk.
Yeah.
I just want to thank you for picking this.
I was
I
thrilled when
think
I heard about this. It was like happy.
I think
He was.
again, I probably would have picked something a little bit less challenging, just in the interest of trying to get Beckett here. But yeah, I thank you for picking this. I mean, first you said Monk, and then you said Brilliant Corners. I'm like, where the fuck did that come from?
I'm just here to surprise you.
There you go.
Well, thank you. I
And
appreciate
I
it.
had never listened to this album, so it was a real insight to hear like Max Roach doing this really, really well. When I would have thought, I'm not so sure Max is the best drummer for Monk. And like I said, I'd heard all the material, but not this album. And oh my God, that solo on
Memphis Swing.
no, Brilliant Corners is like
Brilliant Corners.
that's the best drum solo I've ever heard on a Monk tune ever. That is
I'm
so awesome.
I'm so glad I got to talk to you guys about it because, like I said, this album causes me anxiety, and I was like, you know what? Let's have somebody like people that are a little bit more knowledgeable on this subject convince me otherwise. And I don't know if you did that. I think it still causes anxiety because when I played jazz, I one not a great jazz person, and two, I was always panicked about improv. So
I was thinking about it today. I think I was listening to the title track, and I thought, this thing, I don't count the bars. I know where the shifts are, so um, I don't find any anxiety in it, although I can see why other people would. And I think if you become, I think a lot of things that are odd form, if you become comfortable enough with the melody that the shifts don't surprise you anymore, that takes the edge off the anxiety.
I think you got to know your people. I think you got to be in the groove with the people, and it's a trust exercise. Um,
Yes,
but
catch me.
I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and I hope to catch you on the next one.
Sounds like a plan.